Growing up in a Filipino American church, I've seen a lot of tension between the first generation and the second generation. And one of the major points of contention that I've seen happen a lot is on how we spend the church's money. The first generation generally wants to conserve the money, save the money, and only spend it when it's absolutely necessary. And maybe they want to save it in case there's a trial or there's some hardship in the church, and they want to save the money just in case something bad happens. But then the second generation, they want to generally spend the money. For example, if they want to upgrade the mics at the church so that there's a better quality sounding of the singing, or maybe they want the pastor to sound better, or whoever's speaking in the microphone to sound better, they may want to invest in some microphones, or maybe they want to invest in some cameras for the live stream at the church. Or maybe if there's a special event like a retreat, they want to invest in hiring a photographer so that when there's pictures taken of the event, there would be good quality photos and it would be nice to remember the event by. And these things, they're not absolutely necessary, but these two things are just things that are nice to have. Now, why do I bring this up? I think this kind of relationship or this kind of tension is very common, and I just want to bring some attention to it. And also, it kind of reminds me of the relationship between a parent and a child. Usually parents, they say no to their children, right? And children, they generally want to ask their parents to help buy certain things. And I kind of see this kind of relationship happening between the first generation and the second generation in a church. So how do we go about addressing this point of contention? I have a lot of thoughts about this and I'm still thinking about it, but I think one way that we can address this is first by being aware that this is an issue. Just by being aware that the first generation generally wants to conserve money, it would be good for the second generation to know about it. And likewise, if the second generation wants to spend money, it'd be nice if the first generation is aware of that. So maybe one day the second generation really wants to hire a photographer. The first generation can have that in mind. Oh, they just want to be able to have some souvenir for the event. So maybe they'll say yes to having that photographer for that event, just for example. And another thing that I can think of on how we can address this is, I think the way that the second generation can get discouraged by the disapproval or by the first generation not wanting to approve certain purchases. When that happens a lot, the second generation can get discouraged and they start to feel that the first generation doesn't want to invest in them. They feel that the first generation doesn't care about their ministry. So I think something to keep in mind and something we should bear in mind is that we want the first generation to be able to convey to the second generation that they really care about the second generation. And the second generation needs to be able to feel that. They need to be able to understand that. And likewise between a parent and a child, the child needs to know that the parent has their best interest in mind. When the child knows that their parent has their best interest in mind, the child can then submit to the parent and be willing to be okay that, oh, we can't buy this thing is because I trust my parent in this decision. And so likewise, I think with the second generation, there needs to be that sort of relationship where the first generation conveys that the second generation, that their ministry is important and they do care about their ministry. So those are just two ways that I think we can help address this point of contention between these two generations in our churches. And I'd like to hear about more from your perspective. What do you think? If you grew up in a Filipino American church, how did you feel about how the church spent money? And during those kinds of points of contention, what are some scenarios or what are some stories that you have on this issue? I'd love to hear your thoughts.